Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Ever since I was a kid, I struggled with my weight. I don't think I really struggled as a little kid very much. I just ate. But it's one of those things where I discovered that, if one Snickers bar was good, 27 was better. And, I was somewhat sedentary. I wasn't very good at sports. I certainly went out and explored the world as a kid, but I was more of a naturalist. So I'd check things out and I wasn't running around so much as I was just exploring the woods around my house and all that sort of stuff. And I also enjoyed reading quite a bit, so I did a lot of that. And so all these things don't necessarily add up to a lot of physical activity that the other kids were doing. And, so I remember, being a little pudgy as a kid and, starting to feel bad about that only because I got ribbed by the other children. But that was something that, continued on into adulthood, off and on. And I have some really terrible pictures of me playing bass. I think maybe right around like 1989 or something like that, where we were at this party. And I remember getting really mad because we're playing. And then when it's time for us to eat, there was no more cheese. So I had to have a hamburger instead of a cheeseburger. But I look at this picture now and it's ridiculous. We used to call ourselves Uncle John's Gut Band instead of Jug Band because those pictures made us, they didn't make us look fat. We were fat. So anyhow, I started trying to lose weight in earnest, probably, a few times, but I remember right around 30 was where I really got good at it and was going to the gym every day and running and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of funny because after a long period of abstinence, I started using again right around that period. So that really makes me chuckle a little bit why, how I managed to do both of those things at the same time, including starting to smoke cigarettes again. So I'd go for a run and then smoke a cigarette. So how crazy is that? Pretty crazy. But anyhow, if you watch my channel for any length of time, or if you go back and look at some of my videos, you can see me lose weight and gain weight and lose weight and gain weight. And, when I'm losing weight, I'm very good at it. And, when I'm going to the gym, I'm very good at it. And I tend to get very rigid in what my diet is. Excuse me. And that tends to work for me. But that requires very often for me not to eat what the other people in the house are eating, to have this very, regimented diet. And it can be somewhat not fun every once in a while. Now, right now, I started going back to the gym again after a long hiatus, and then I hurt my back at work. And so I had to take time off the gym after having about a couple of weeks of momentum. And because of that, I decided, well, I should be able to eat whatever I wanted. So I did, in earnest. And so now I'm back, having to get back in the gym now that my back is healed up. And so I need to do that again. But it's one of those things that it's frustrating that this is as much of a struggle as it is. Quitting things that, put me into active withdrawal was in some ways easier. And I don't want to say it was easy. I don't want to minimize that at all. And, if you've done that, or if you're, contemplating doing that, or if you're in the process of doing that, I'm not minimizing that. And the psychological impact of not using those substances and is, something that takes time to get over. And I remember when I had 8 months clean, I quit smoking cigarettes, and that I use the same principles of recovery. Just for a day, I'm not going to smoke, no matter what happens, no matter how I feel. And, that took some time as well. I didn't cheat, but it was difficult. But, when it comes to food, that's a different story because we got to eat, right? We have to eat something. And I've noticed that, very often I can go for a long time without eating at all, during the day. And then once I eat something, it's on. Some switch gets triggered. And then, it's fascinating. I can get to the point where I'm fully satiated or beyond satiated, like actively a little uncomfortable, but still be desirous of eating. I got to get something else to eat. And, talk to myself like, dude, that's incredibly stupid. Like, what are you doing? I don't know if you can relate. And the closest I've ever gotten to being able to maintain like a reasonable diet was going for complete abstinence of anything that was bad for me, all the junk food type stuff. And if you've done this in the past, you get to this point where clean food, if you will, feels good to eat. And then when you eat something that's processed or whatever, it feels kind of disgusting, or even the thought of it gets that way. And this is something that happens, and it's not just a psychological trick. I've noticed it's something that it's like, oh yeah, that's really kind of crappy. But I've noticed, like, once I eat something that's not great for me, then it's on. And I would joke with people all the time that if I ate a candy bar, then I would wake up on the Berlin Turnpike, which is a place here with motels and all that kind of stuff where all sorts of seedy things happen, you know, in bed with somebody I didn't know, surrounded by empty Ben and Jerry's containers with no car. Because that's what tends to happen. So it's funny for me, the closest I can get is you can't be abstinent from food because you'll die. And that's not the goal. But very often I have to be completely abstinent from junk food. Can we see these birds that are chirping? No, I think they're just all over the place. Very, very nice here in Susan's yards today. And the dogs are just enjoying laying on the pool cover and all that kind of good junk. But, that's been the closest I've gotten to. And so right now it's frustrating because I'm in that spot again where, I have an amount of weight on me that just feels uncomfortable. It's not just about vanity, although there is some vanity. I see the pictures of myself, gigging. That's usually when people take pictures of me and like, oh man. But that's a really difficult thing to struggle with. I don't know if you can relate, but clearly here in America, we got a lot of people that struggle with their weight. And of course, we're inundated with all this, these bad choices. But I'm not going to blame it on that. I'm going to lay the blame on me, or at least responsibility on me. That's a better way to put it, not the blame. And it's one of those things that's a lot harder. And there's so many other things that I've quit or that I've altered, where it really just it comes down to, like, I'm not going to do this anymore, whatever the bad habit is, and I'm going to replace it with this good habit, which I suppose is part of what I need to do here, now that I think of it, which is what I've done in the past, replace one habit with another. But it's a lot tougher for some reason. And, very often the principles of recovery are the same, regardless of what you're trying to address. We take care of our addictions in the order they're killing us. And, eating unhealthy will definitely kill you sooner or later. That's one of the things I've noticed is, when you're younger, you think that people that are 40 or 50 or 60 are incredibly old. And I remember actually being a kid thinking, man, in the year 2000, I'll be 32. Any Gen Xers out there? You're just like, oh my God, that's so old. Get off my lawn. My my oldest daughter's going to be 32 in September, and my youngest is going to be 30 in August, which is wild. But one of the things I noticed, after 40, definitely, by the time I hit 50, is there was a serious bifurcation in people around the age of 60. And what I mean is, you would meet people that were 60, you didn't know, and they would tell you, you'd ask, somehow their age would come up. And either you would say, oh my God, I thought you were like in your 40s, maybe like 40, 43, 44. Or you would think to yourself, my God, I thought you were 80. And, a lot of it, some of it's genetics, but a lot of it is like how we take care of ourselves. And I certainly would like to be in the first group. But, if I don't, I only got a few years. I only have 3 years now, man. I realize that if I don't turn things around, I can feel myself, uncomfortable enough moving around and huffing and puffing and all that kind of stuff. It's like, I said, man, I better get back on it. So it's not about vanity. It's about being able to enjoy life and all that sort of stuff. But man, is it a hard thing to tackle? It's a hard thing to tackle. And I suppose there are things like accountability and what have you that are normal in other kinds of recovery that, I should be using here. But let me know if this is something you struggle with, if there's ways that you've found to help you with it. It's one of those things that it's out there. It's a real issue. And it's not just in the how-to. A lot of it's in the head, too. You know what I mean? Talk to you later, kids.